Okay, so the Browns win. It's hard to say that. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They beat Tom Brady in overtime, 23-17. You know, since the win against the Cincinnati Bengals was the most dominating win, but I enjoyed this game more than that one because of everything that went into it, all the emotions that were involved. That Jacoby Brissett and the way the team played, and the challenge, and the fact that they had to come back and tie it, and they won it in overtime. There's a lot there that was great. You got to see it. This is like a movie in some ways. Like, you had character arcs that were very interesting.
Yes. I cannot wait to talk about this because I texted Pete and he said he was making a list.
Yes. So this was like really fun because it felt like the end of the game. It felt like you just watched a movie in some ways, even though it was a sporting event and everything else. It was great. This puts the Browns in a weird spot. They're 4-7. Deshaun Watson's going to come back. The Houston Texans.
Hey, Pete, you predicted this record. You were right on.
I did.
4-7.
Houston Texans are awful. So now the Browns all of a sudden have a lot of enthusiasm about what they can do and everything. So everybody's feeling good about themselves. And again, I've talked about this. I do feel like the Deshaun Watson factor, in addition to Jacoby Brissett, was a big factor for this team in sort of getting them sort of ready and in the right mindset to play this game, that I think helps this team going forward. But Bri, where are we at? Where are you at with the Browns this week?
Listen, I'm so happy right now. Sunday was actually a lot of fun. Obviously, having the victory made that a lot more enjoyable. Had they not been able to pull it off, we'd be feeling a little bit different. But as you mentioned, there were a lot of good storylines coming out of the game. It was fun to see a lot of our star players really show up when it mattered the most. I could list a lot of them and big moments that they had. The Browns came back from some mistakes. They overcame them. The Amari Cooper drop, one of them, he made obviously an amazing play, an amazing catch later on down the line. David Njoku with his one-handed grab on a slightly high pass that Harrison Bryant couldn't bring down a week ago.
He couldn't have caught that with a ladder. He couldn't have caught that with a ladder.
That's right. MJ Emerson playing out of his mind at cornerback. Yes. You know, I go back and I'm like, the offense was very frustrating at times and a lot of stalling again, in between after that first drive. Oh, and how could I forget, Pete? Anthony Schwartz.
Yes, he's on the list.
Being effective. But I just want to add here, I was pretty critical of Andrew Berry and drafting players and not having them make impacts on this team right away.
Let's go.
I have to take back what I said because I am not someone who needs to be right about everything. But I think the way that MJ Emerson played, the way that Anthony Schwartz was utilized and effective in this game, I felt better about the direction things were headed. Also, you had some plays made on the defensive line where we've been pretty critical outside of Miles and Jadeveon this year that, this team did what it needed to do. Players stepped up when they needed to step up. And people that haven't been as effective this year, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball or the defense side of the ball, stepped up and made plays when they mattered the most. And not to mention, you had your star players showing up and executing at the same time. So as we talked about last week, this team is not good enough to make mistakes because they can't overcome them. Well, I actually felt like this was a bit of a page turner for them of having some mishaps, missed field goal, some drops that they had to overcome, some penalties, although they weren't as bad as last week, making stops on third down. I mean, Pete, this felt really good and something to build from.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. Everything did not go right in this game. We talked about this last week. The Browns went 8 drives in between touchdowns against the Buffalo Bills. They went 9 drives in between touchdowns against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was
painful.
Yeah, it was bad at times, and they really stalled out. The field goal, it was a fiasco, and we'll get to that because there's more to it than that. To me, if you were to sort of boil Jacoby Brissett down, I felt like the team played like the person he has been this season.
Yes.
He is not a great quarterback. He's not. And you saw that in this game. He was not a great quarterback in this game. But what he is he's very resilient. He's very mentally tough. And he carries himself with a lot of poise. And he
works hard. I mean, he's a hard worker. He doesn't give up. That's the other thing, Pete, that I didn't mention. The Browns came back from being down. They fought their way back to a victory, which is also something that we really haven't seen them do. And
one of the things that Jacoby Brissett has not done this season, and has mentioned this at times, other than maybe you could say the Carolina game, he helped them sort of dig out of the hole that they made for themselves. He has sort of,
and in the final few minutes.
Yes, this has been a theme. High pressure situations, he has not been good. He delivered in 2 key high pressure situations. So like in that sense, he got to sort of complete the resume of the season for him. He got to sort of, again, you talk about this character development. He got to sort of start from one place and then end up in another. And he won over a lot of people. Like Mina Kimes on ESPN is like all about Jacoby Brissett getting an opportunity to be a starter like that, which by the way would be great for the Browns if that were to happen. Like all these things where you're just sitting there and you feel good about the team because you feel good about who Jacoby Brissett is and that impact that he has had on this team. Like every player on your team is not going to be a great player. And Jacoby Brissett's not going to be. And I worry that he's going to become a footnote ultimately because, if he's never plays for this team again, he's going to play 11 games. And we've got a whole shirt of guys who have played for like that amount of time. Right. And like you think back and you can't name them. But, I don't care what level of football you're talking about, high school, college, pro, he is a guy you can build a program with. He's the type of guy you want in your locker room because of just the amount of good energy and leadership and just the way he sort of lifts everybody else up. And you saw that in the post game. And it's easy to do that. I grant when you win. I still do think that a lot of that sentiment was genuine and having players like Joe Bitonio, elder statesman of the team coming out and going, this is one of my favorite quarterbacks I've ever played with.
Yeah.
That means a lot. And if you watch Jacoby Brissett in the press conference, at least his post game, that sort of caught him off guard a little bit. I don't think he was sort of expecting that. I don't think Brissett realized just how much he meant to this team because in a lot of ways he was an interim quarterback, and I thought it was entertaining when like Tony Grossi was asking about like how, where does he go from here? He's like, I'm not dead. I'm still got to show up for work.
I love him.
So he's great at that stuff. Like, so I was really happy for them because he didn't play well for most of the game. But, and again, who is Jacoby Brissett? He's the guy who basically incidentally runs over Antoine Winfield Jr.
That was amazing, by the way.
Like, again, who is he as a player? That is who he is. He's the guy who's going to go out there and just run over a dude by accident because he's 250 pounds and whatever. But he, like I said, he got to complete his resume with this team and it was like really meaningful to be able to send him out with a win.
Yes, it was the cherry on top, the icing on the cake, whatever you want to use to describe this game. But I also think too, just in how they won this game meant a lot to this team too. I know that losing makes a lot of small problems seem like bigger ones. We were seeing a lot of conversation come out last week, just in different quotes players were saying get spun to try to decipher like what they were saying. And Myles Garrett is requesting a trade. And like, we were psychoanalyzing all of these comments and because that's all we had to talk about because the team wasn't winning. And there was a lot of question just about leadership and locker room turmoil and if Kevin Stefanski is a leader and who should be fired. And it felt like this game and the way that this team played kind of squashed all of that. And I know obviously because they won, those problems, kind of go by the wayside. But to me, like in seeing how they played and how they came back from the loss the week prior, I don't think this team has a problem. I'm excited because I think there is obviously a lot to look forward to the rest of this season with knowing that there's going to be an upgrade at the quarterback level. And I do think this team played for Jacoby's last game while also knowing that they can build from this and probably get even better. So, was there some fire around that as well? But yeah, overall, like this was a really fun football game to watch. And the fact they did it against Tom Brady, I know as Browns fans were ruined. We think that something's always going to go wrong. And when you're up against the greatest quarterback of all time, quite frankly, like I was very panicked going into those final few minutes and, making sure that we didn't score soon, like quick enough or too soon so that Brady got the ball back and like just marched down the field in like 15 seconds because he's capable of doing that. Like I just, like we're just so ruined in that something's going to go wrong. When that extra point was made, I was like, okay, I think just based on like how things are going, like we have a really good shot of winning this game in overtime. And I don't know if you thought, Pete, we were going to go for 2. My husband was like dead set that Kevin Stefanski was going to go for 2 to like win the game.
I didn't really have an inkling one way or the other because I could see the argument both ways.
Yeah.
You weren't exactly lighting the world on fire offensively. So it was
right.
But at the same time, you may not have felt like you could sustain another 10 minutes of football. So I thought it was one of the situations where, this wasn't a data-driven decision. This was a situation where you were going to go, no, I got to go with my gut. So I didn't really have an inkling one way or the other. But the one thing I did find interesting, did you see who Jacoby Brissett celebrated with first right after they won the game?
Was it Kevin Stefanski?
Yes.
I saw the picture of the hug.
Yes.
The awkward hug.
and like, maybe that doesn't mean a whole lot, but he goes a really long way away from the play and goes right over and gives Kevin Stefanski the biggest hug ever. So like, it's always weird to me when people are like complaining about, he's not emotional enough and all this stuff. Players want coaches who care.
Yeah.
So, yeah. They want guys who know what they're doing. Yeah. They want a lot of other things out of coach, but they want guys they know care about them. Kevin Stefanski signs Jacoby. They signed Jacoby Brissett, and we've talked about this. All these people are saying, no, you have to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. You've got to go do this, that, and the other thing. And they said, no, we've got the guy we want.
Yeah.
That has to mean a lot to Jacoby Brissett that they stuck with him. And obviously he delivered on his end in a lot of ways. But I do think like people underestimate how much that cares. And like, this is completely off topic, but like I was watching the Steelers Colts game yesterday.
Yes.
After hearing a certain radio host, I don't want to name, bitch about not rallying the defense and all this other crap. And I'm watching Mike Tomlin as the game struggles. He doesn't do shit the whole game. He just stands there like, and he's talking to his coaches. He's paying attention to the game. He's making calls because he doesn't do that stuff either. Like it's contrived crap. Like, and no one's going to sit here and go, he's not a good enough leader. He's not, he's never had a losing season. Like we come up with stuff that doesn't matter because we think it's a casting call or something, as opposed to what coaching really is. It's a teacher. It's again, somebody gives a shit. So like, I like that for Kevin Stefanski because I do think that matters. And again, somebody can write it off and go, oh, that, but literally he goes away from the 10 guys who just scored. You would think, because that stood out to me, having coached players and see that players are going to go celebrate with players. They're not running around coaches. So it stood out to me that he went and the first thing he did was celebrate with Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, I love that. I love that picture too. Was it you who posted it? Was it you or Abby that posted it?
Abby did. Okay. It was a good shot.
Yeah. Who responded and said that clearly he's on his tiptoes. He doesn't look like he needs to show more emotion during that. Oh, I was just laughing because I was like, that is so spot on. We're going to analyze body language and pictures now.
No, I was like, I said something, then she came back and said something pretty good about if he was a real leader, he would have picked Jacoby up.
Yes. That was I was really laughing at that.
So it was good. But speaking of Kevin Stefanski, like I said, not all good. There's one spot in this game that was just peculiar, and it stood out to both of us because I immediately got a text message when it happened. The Browns are in the red zone. They get a holding penalty or some I think it was a holding call. And it becomes 1st and 20. And then next 3 calls, were to me, and obviously you had the same thought, we're sort of like, why are we conceding the drive here? Why are we not doing this? I know one of them was I think the third down play was a wide receiver screen, but like the first play was a pass, I think, to David Bell for like 6 yards or something, run, I think, and then a wide receiver screen. It was like,
we just like gave up.
Yeah, it was like, okay, I guess we get 3 then on this drive.
Yeah,
and like it was conservative to me, and I get it. The Bucs defense is good to an extent, but we had to do more with that than that. Touchdowns were obviously a commodity to be had, and obviously points mattered. And I think that's they lean too far into that, but it wasn't good. And then on top of that, they really look bad because you get the field goal that went sideways. And I don't want to get into this whole thing about like kicking and stuff because I don't know enough about it, but like there's this whole thing going. Corey Bojorquez, the punter, apparently is like a horrible holder.
Yeah, I've been seeing that too.
And I don't know how true that was on this particular kick or whatever. Obviously, they had made a 51-yard field goal earlier, which was like, thank God, to just have this miss. So like this whole thing of like conceding for points you weren't going to get. I mean, if they had gotten the field goal, I think we'd all been like, okay, you got 3 points. But it's even when they, even if they had gotten 3 points, I think I would have felt the same way about that particular drive and that particular set of calls in that moment.
Yes, I would agree with that. I do remember texting you now about that particular series because it was just extremely frustrating. Like we get the penalty that sets us back behind the sticks again, which like is something that we're used to. And then it was almost like he just threw out 3 plays and was hoping to just get some yards back, but not even try to go get a first down and score. It's just puzzling sometimes.
Right. Or just take a shot in the end zone.
Right.
Something. But yeah, it was bad. Now I contrast that against a situation where Stefanski took a lot of heat, and I actually agreed with him. Was late in the game, the Browns are stuck in their own end and they get a holding penalty, and they try to come out their own end, and ultimately they're on 3rd and forever. I think it was 3rd and 20, and they hand the ball off to Kareem Hunt. And a lot of people got very annoyed at that call. There, I think that was actually a sensible choice. Now, would I have done it that way? Maybe not. But I do think in that situation, on your own end of the field, that was more sensible in that, because that leads to the sort of game-changing set of events. Like we always hear this buzz concept of complementary football. The Browns punt the ball from their own 23-yard line. It goes 57 yards. I think they had a penalty on it. Anthony Schwartz, no less, drew the penalty, and they end up on their own 20. So it's 57 yards. They get a penalty right away on hands to the face on Myles Garrett. They then end up losing 10 more yards, I think, on the drive overall, or something along those lines. They have to, which is one of the sacks by Myles Garrett. I think that was the one with him and Clowney. They get a great stop. Then they force the punt. They get a short punt. Donovan Peoples-Jones fields it and returns it 12 yards. So the Browns end up, I believe, on the 46-yard line, something like that.
Yeah, they were close to the 50.
So like in that like series of events, I did the math on this. It was 31 yards of field position they gained from punt to then getting the ball back. And then that turns into immediately Chubb running up the sideline, and they ultimately get the game time score there. Like that is a situation where I can say, yeah, I understand why he's doing it that way. I can say there is a time to be conservative, as opposed to just saying like, I don't like the mindset of we should just go for it, because too often we've seen this where they get aggressive in that type of situation, and it turns into a turnover or some of their disasters. Agreed. So I think it's absolutely fair to criticize that the missed field goal set of plays, but I think in this case, given the way the game was going, it really paid off for him to trust in his team in a way that ultimately turned the game over and allowed them to tie the game.
Yeah, and the defense had really been playing well, which has really not been something that we could say. So in doing that, like, you're putting faith in your defense to be able to make a big stop or another big play, which they ended up following through on.
Right. So speaking of the defense, Martin Emerson, that was
my man.
One of the most fun games to watch the Brown, a corner play in a long time. And the Browns have been very fortunate with the corners they've had on their team. There have been some great performances. Obviously, you go back to the Cincinnati Bengals game a year ago where they just absolutely shut down the Bengals offense. And Denzel Ward intercepted that pass going to Jamar Chase, and Greg Newsome had a great game. And like John Johnson was great in that game. But that was a team-wide game. This was Martin Emerson against Mike Evans for the most part. He also covered Brashad Perryman. He also covered a tight end at one point, and nobody was getting anything on him. Mm-hmm. He did give up a pass interference, but this is a rookie, a third-round rookie, and he was the best player on the defense. And Myles Garrett had a great game, but Martin Emerson was the best player on the defense. Mike Evans was like visibly discouraged and frustrated at points, like when Martin Emerson unceremoniously just threw him out of bounds. Mike Evans is like 240 pounds, and he just threw him out. It was great. So, this is what they drafted Martin Emerson to do. He's a big guy. He's physical. He's fearless. Like we've talked about, he's a prick in the best way possible. He just does not care about you or your loved ones. He's going to just play his game, and he doesn't let mistakes linger. He's a guy who can get past it and play great coverage. And this is the matchup where he just got to showcase that and really sort of establish himself. And Brian Baldinger, for people who watch his videos, which are great, and you listen to him do this stuff, and you can tell he's standing up just the way he talks because he's so excited.
I love him. I love listening to him talk when he does these. It's amazing.
So, and he's like, this is the best corner performance I've seen all year.
I did hear he said that. Also, whoever was doing the broadcast, I forget who they were. They were also they were singing his MJ Emerson's praises as well, the entire broadcast.
Yes, PFF not so much. He was not one of the top 15 rookies for this week, which was very surprising to me.
Really?
Yes, but nevertheless, that's why it's a tool, not gospel. But
we have eyeballs, PFF.
Well, he was great. And it was a major factor because Tom Brady was unwilling to accept that this man was taking away.
Yeah, he kept throwing it his way too.
Yeah, 10 times overall. He caught 2 passes for 31 yards, although Martin Emerson was quick to point out on Twitter, 0 catches for 0 receptions against me.
Not on me.
So, yeah, look, we'll see. I think Martin Emerson's always going to have some trouble with, the Tyreek Hill type receivers of the world, those small, quicker guys. But against these bigger guys, and the Browns face a number of them, T. Higgins, the Steelers have what's his face? They just drafted after
Pickens?
Yes, Pickens, who's great and make all types of catches. He's a bigger guy. Those type of matchups are things that are going to favor Emerson. It's a great pick for the division, but it allows you to sort of cover these other type of players. I will be curious to see if the Browns were to play the Chiefs, are they ever going to just say, look, we're just going to put Martin Emerson on Travis Kelce? Now, we may provide help, but are they going to say this is just what we're doing with this? That would be pretty brave, but I could see that being part of their game plan. So obviously the best game of this kid's young career, but he's been this was a breakout performance for a player who's played really well this season and hopefully is, a preview of things to come for him.
I would agree. Happy that we drafted someone who has made an immediate impact this year.
Okay.
Same year.
And with that, we talk about the run defense and the play overall. There's good and there's bad in this. One, the good, they did it. They stopped the run.
They did.
The Bucs had 2 plays that went big. Both involved Julio Jones. The first play of the game for them, first offensive play, They had a really good call for what the Browns were doing. Myles Garrett flies upfield. They hand it off to Rachaad White, who goes right to where Myles Garrett was standing. At the same time, Julio Jones is doing a crack block to get to the linebacker. He walls off everybody in the middle of the field and gets Martin Emerson, who's manning him up at that point, to follow him. And there's nobody there at that point. So it's just daylight. So you get 35 yards and everybody's like, oh, here we go again. And I get the sentiment, but like, this is a case, and the Browns do this to other teams too. The Bucks just made the right call. They great timing on their part. They hit it 35 yards, boom. And both of their big run plays led to touchdowns. Julio Jones had the other one going 15 yards on a sweep. But overall, the rest of the time they had 46 yards, 46 on 18, which is 2.5 a carry. The bad is that the Browns were super simple. They were basic as hell. And on some point, people are going to be like, oh, that's great. It allows them to play fast. And I get it. But part of the reason they are simple is because they have guys who cannot do anything else, which is scary and is going to be something that they have to deal with in the offseason. But that is sort of where they are. And the Buccaneers can't deal with that because, one, their offensive line is in shambles due to injuries and attrition, which is why I wouldn't get super excited at the idea that the Browns defense is suddenly fixed. The other part about that is Tom Brady's not exactly going to run with the ball. So it's not like he can do much to exploit it. They tried with the passing game. So those two factors worked out really well. The defensive tackles played better. I think, again, some of that I would attribute to the fact the Bucs are not very good, but credit to them. They made a stop on 3rd and 1 that I have not seen all season. And JOK was obviously a huge part of that. JOK played really well.
Mm-hmm.
But like at one point, Taven, on that same player where they get that guy, they get the back well behind the line of scrimmage. Taven Bryan just like kills the man ahead of him. Jadeveon Clowney, who probably had one of his better games this season, was really effective on that, and it was impressive. Credit where it's due. And I think what you saw in that was that like guys like Tony Fields came up and made a big play. Denzel Ward was he didn't cover very well, but he was very effective in run defense. And that is how much I would say just having even average defensive tackle play would change everything about this defense. Is suddenly the linebackers look way better because they're not dealing with guys on top of them. They're not getting, defensive tackles pushed back into them. And that allows you to do so much more. You get to see the athleticism. You get to see them play downhill more. And that was really good. Like Tony Fields' play was great. I don't even know how many plays he was on the field, but that particular stop was outstanding.
Well, I was just going to say, like, you brought up Tony Fields. Like, there were a couple of moments in this game overall where I was like, who?
Yeah.
Like, who made that play? Like, both on the offense and defense, because there were just different guys utilized overall. And like, I guess, like, some of it was also injury related. But just overall, I was like, there were guys that just stepped up in both, like, roles that they should already be stepping up in. But then other guys that, maybe have not been super impactful this season that were able to step up and make plays. So that was just really nice to see.
I agree. And with that, Myles Garrett, look.
Myles.
I don't know what the deal is with his shoulder. I'm hoping it's just the AC joint sprain.
Yeah, that did not look good. It looked like it was like hanging by a thread there.
But like, because an AC sprain sucks, but it's pain largely. It just hurts like absolute hell. And it's pain management as opposed to necessarily needing to be operated on. That is what he initially suffered with the car wreck. And then when people are saying, well, he re-injured, I don't know if they're saying that because we haven't really got much detail and play.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we know anything?
No, and we got this very sort of weird question and answer thing where they're asking about it and they're saying, are you going to need surgery? And he's like, gives this sort of non-committal answer, which, you could take any number of ways that maybe it's not even a question of needing, it just needs to heal, or maybe it is that bad and he's just going to play through it. But like, you got this very mysterious sort of thing where you don't know what's going on with him. And obviously it was, it gave him a lot of trouble in the game. Like I said, I hope it's an AC sprain. That would just be rest and recovery from. I think it can get bad enough where you actually would need to surgically deal with it, but it just hurts like hell. And the way he described re-injuring it again made me think maybe that's what it is. But in any case, he was great. And the 2 sacks he had both came on third down, one in the fourth quarter, one in overtime. Obviously, forced the possession to end, which is critical. And on the second one, I watched the game tape again. I have not seen this actually timed. I would very much like to see literally how much time it took, because on the game clock, it was 3:29. He touches Tom Brady at 3:27. If it's actually 2 seconds, that's freaky. Even if it's, barely more than that, but it's insane how fast he whips Donovan Smith and how quickly he gets around on that play. Like that was superhuman.
Yeah. I mean, Miles is just, he really is superhuman at times. And I think because he's such just a mammoth of a player, he's a beast, but he's also super quick. You forget sometimes, or I think fans forget sometimes, like, I don't know how lucky we are to have him on our team. And
they often forget how lucky
I guess like all season, it's like just trade Miles. I mean, that's like one of the craziest things I think I've ever seen on the internet this year.
It's like the thing I would relate it to are the people who got fed up with losing with LeBron. They're just like, trade.
That's a fair comparison. Like, he's so good and so dominant that you just forget like how much of an impact he makes. And like, I know that we're homers and biased, but it does feel like he gets held on almost every single play and he doesn't get the calls.
Well, that's what he thinks, given what he said in the press conference.
I mean, like, you see clips of it and I'm like, I don't understand.
He got tackled on.
Yeah, like, I don't understand what is a hold. I don't get it. And like, I know that they can't throw a flag on every single play, even though it feels like they could. He gets treated like Shaq, where it's like, oh, he's just too good. So like, it's almost like too much of an advantage to have him on your football team, but then also to have penalties thrown to help him out even more. It's like he has to fight against all of the like adversity to make a play. And I will say, like, sometimes he does look exhausted because he is fighting and he is putting in effort. And I think sometimes fans see clips and they're like, oh, he's giving up. And I'm like, no, he's exhausted because he's going up against so many double teams. He's working his butt off to get after the quarterback. And obviously, teams are going to be game planning against Myles Garrett, right? Their entire game plan is to essentially build around Myles Garrett to get the ball out quickly and not have to deal with him. Like, if you're not doing that, then you're not smart as a team that's playing against the Cleveland Browns. But like, think about that. You have a player on your team that the other team is literally being like, how can we take Myles Garrett out of this game? Because if we don't, he's going to wreck it.
Yeah, I think the standard for Myles Garrett at this point for most people is he has to be superhuman. Like, he has to be. Yeah, which he can't just be good. He has to be the best ever on a given day. It's tough. Like I said, it's like LeBron. He can score 40 and whatever when he was with the Cavs the first time, and it became very easy for people to sort of start taking that for granted. And I don't think he necessarily orchestrated this, but it did happen to work out that way, where gratitude for LeBron didn't really happen in the way it probably should have until he came back.
Yes.
Even though he would leave again, but there was this suddenly the fear of actually losing the possibility of actually losing him sort of made people work differently. And I think included in that was the media. I think the media treated him differently. When he came back, people were very hard on him. And I get it because he's so good, but like the expectations were just unrealistic. So, and what's strange is the Bucs did not game plan for Myles Garrett. The game plan was Tom Brady's never holding on the ball long enough to make it matter. And it cost them dearly. Yeah. On those two occasions. Tom Brady's great at avoiding that, but that is what the Miami Dolphins did. Now, they had a better left tackle in Terran Armstead who could help that, and the Browns for whatever reason didn't really move Myles around in that game. But yeah, it's like that play is I don't think anyone else could have made that play on this planet. Just
but I also feel like too, there was another play where Tom Brady held onto the ball for like extremely long. Like it was so long.
The one where Elliott got him.
Yes, and I was like, geez, oh man, if you can't bring him down with like 10 seconds, like we don't deserve to win this football game. Like I was like, someone please get him.
Just thinking about that reminds me of the movie Cabin in the Woods, which is a very strange horror movie.
I never saw. I'm not a big horror movie fan overall,
but it's very funny. Anyway, the one dude, like this whole thing is like, it doesn't matter. But at one point, this guy who's like they've run this group sort of figures out what monsters are going to do whatever they need to do to sort of keep this existence going. And this one guy's this super big proponent of the merman. And, they sort of get their comeuppance, and the merman slowly comes and like gets him. And he's like sort of resolved the fact it's the merman. Like Jordan Elliott was so slow. And it was like almost like Tom Brady's like, okay, fine, you can have it. So it was sort of interesting. Jordan Elliott, it was not like some great play, but it was just like Tom Brady's like, screw it. I guess I'm down. But yeah, it was like, it was really good to see. We mentioned Anthony Schwartz briefly. People do not understand how fast he is. And it is an optical illusion in some ways because you don't realize how quick he's going. And it's not the reverse. I think the reverse looks very fast. It's the 17-yard gain he had. The Browns were messing around with orbit motion quite a bit, which is going to be really interesting when Deshaun Watson comes back. They orbit motion is that, as opposed to a jet motion, which is straight across. Orbit is where they're going around the back, and occasionally they reverse it and have him go back the other way. But he goes orbit motion all the way from the right to the left, and it messes with the Bucs defense, and they don't count for him. He's wide open. And Brissett gets on the ball, and it's like he makes a guy miss, and like 3 steps, he's 10 yards down the field further. It was 17 yards. You're like, wow, this is sort of like an average game. No, it was 17 yards, and he had like 3 or 4 steps. He's that fast, which is why they are going to give this kid every chance to make it work because there are only so many people who can do what he can do. He also is good on special teams, which I thought was important. But what stood out to me, again, Jacoby Brissett's press conference, he was asked about it. And this is not the first time he sort of like talked about Anthony Schwartz. The fan base in general, obviously not a big proponent. Like a lot of people wanted to cut him before the season because he's dropping balls in preseason. That team, that locker room, like loves him. Mm-hmm. And Brissett's like, we're all big fans of his, and they call him Schwartzy, and they're just so happy that he was able to contribute because they appreciate how hard he works. And Amari Cooper's like in his press conference, like talking about how hard he works and just hopefully letting it come to him because they all want to see him succeed. And it was interesting. Brissett and Cooper are the 2 guys blocking on the reverse for that play. So look, he has, I think, 264 career yards and 2 touchdowns in the year and a half or whatever you want to call it since been there. He missed time with the concussion. He's been inactive in some games. You're not going to sit there and go, oh, we've got a superstar. But I would hope that you watch that game and you go, all right, I'm glad they didn't get rid of him, and I want to see what he can do, especially because he's really for Deshaun Watson. There's one play where Anthony Schwartz, they tried to go deep to him, and the ball did not go far enough. And Anthony Schwartz had Jamel Dean beat. Jamel Dean's shoulders are square to the line of scrimmage, and Anthony Schwartz is sprinting. He's got him beat, and the ball comes out poorly. It allows Jamel Dean to get on top, and Anthony Schwartz has to commit the offensive pass interference.
Which honestly, that was a really smart play too.
Yes. They ultimately just declined the penalty, but if they had accepted it, would have been like 2 yards. So it was a really, really smart play, but they want to see what this guy can do. I'm curious to see what happens with Deshaun Watson. I think he's going to be a bigger factor. It doesn't mean he's going to suddenly have 500 yards the 6 games that they have him, but I think they are getting to a point where they're going to keep incorporating, because you've seen it wasn't just this week. Last week he was sort of more involved, especially in the opening script last week, as sort of being a guy to to keep the opponent honest with that motion and stuff because he's so fast. It's really hard to deal with that as a defense, and it messes with your rules. At one point, again, they did orbit motion. He went from right to left and then went back to the right, and the corner has to shift out and pick him up. And like, I think it was Amari Cooper, just goes 6 yards, nobody's covering him, turns around and catches the ball because he's wide open. Like, that is what you can do with that type of stuff. So, like I said, Anthony Schwartz, whatever you think of him, he was integral in winning a game.
Yeah, it feels like this is honestly some foreshadowing for what's to come.
I hope so. And it's sucks because
with Deshaun being activated, like I do feel like there were some things that we saw that we hadn't necessarily seen throughout the season. So should we expect that these are things we're going to see more of? I mean, I hope that that's the case, right?
Yeah, and look, it's a third round pick. It's hard to know if they're ever going to get enough return on investment, but like, he didn't pick himself in the third round. He got picked, so I'm happy for the kid. The other guy that stood out to me in sort of a smaller role was Donovan Peoples-Jones. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think, had 21 yards receiving in this game. But he had a big block on Chubb's 28-yard run.
Yep.
And more importantly, he was a dude on punt return. He had 5 punt returns for 75 total yards. One of them was for 29. And,
that was really nice to see. Like, it felt like something was unlocked there.
Yes. And I think some of this is like, you're seeing this as a receiver, like the hurdle against the Bengals. He's starting to get confident with the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
The game is slowing down for him a little bit. So it's allowing him to do that. But like, I remember watching him, when the Browns drafted him when he was coming out of Michigan, like that is who he was at Michigan. Like, he was super confident, was very athletic, and was a real threat on returns. And I think he's starting to get there. And the Browns have since like released Chester Rogers from the practice squad. So at least sounds right now, Peoples-Jones is that dude. But like, again, we already mentioned the one punt return where he goes 12 yards, but he gets a 29-yard return. Like I said, 75 yards total on 5 returns. He's got a 10.6 yard average. He's only returned 10 punts. I get it. But that is like double what anyone else has done at that position. And like, the Browns may have found 2 returners, because even though, it's not a major focus, Jerome Ford is very good at kick return. And he had a 44-yard return that meant absolutely nothing because they did nothing with it right before the half. But he also had a 48-yard return last week that did matter because that was it was on the opening play of the game. And then they went down and scored. None of this is going to get me to say Mike Prefer is doing a good job, but it is nice to see that special teams did something. The cynic in me is going, wow, the Browns found the one team that must be worse on special teams than they are in the box. But no, I mean,
is that the truth? Do we know that?
I could look that up. I don't know if that's true. I don't think so. I think there's a very select few under the Browns.
Yeah, it honestly felt like we were playing against our own special teams in a way.
But it was just, again, he had 21 yards receiving, but he had a major impact on the game. And like, Donovan Peoples-Jones is making himself sort of invaluable as a part of this offense.
Okay, can we talk about my favorite player ever, Amari Cooper? Because when that ball hit him in the chest, was that third down?
4th down.
It was 4th down? Oh,
yes.
It was 4th down. Pete, my stomach just dropped because it was obviously in a pretty pivotal moment of the game too, where it felt like was this it? Like, is this game now over?
Yes, I agree. It felt like a stab in the heart. Like, that was it.
Yeah. And I mean, I hate to even bring this up, but like, it felt like Corey Coleman against the Steelers and just like should have been a catch, like wide open, boom, hits you, drops. And I remember logging onto Twitter, which was a really bad idea at the time. And people were like, oh, well, he's clearly a Cleveland Brown because he can't catch things that are thrown to him. And I just love Amari Cooper so much that my heart was just breaking for him in the moment. And I was like, no, this cannot be it. Like, we can't go out this way. He can't go out this way because he's just too good. And I hate to see players that are not only really good, but also are really smart, leaders on the team. Like, he's done so much this year, and like having such a big impact on this offense and really being unlocked. Like we've talked about it. It's the first time that we're seeing a receiver really be the number one receiver since Josh Gordon in, what was that, 2013?
Yes, 2013 was his all-pro year.
Oh, that feels like that was just like a couple years ago, but that was a really long time ago.
Yeah, Josh Gordon is like 53 years old by now.
I know. Oh my gosh. But anyway, yeah, my heart just kind of broke for Amari, and I'm so happy that he redeemed himself on the play leading up to at the end of the fourth quarter. So I was really happy about that.
One, there's a lot of things here. One, 4th and 9. You could have made me argue there was a 4th and 3 situation earlier where they were near midfield. Maybe they should have gone for it. They punted.
Yeah.
And they go for it here on 4th and 9. They get the exact look they want. Amari Cooper runs a great route. He gets wide open. Jacoby Brissett delivers a great ball. And at the moment, you think all this work they've put in on 4th down, this is what you want. You want it to feel like a normal situation for them. You want them not to feel like it's a big moment that they have to, press or those things. And he drops it. You feel awful for him because he's been genuinely sensational. But
I almost cried. I literally almost cried.
But they
also showed him on the bench, Pete. They showed him on the bench looking sad.
Well, the thing is, if you get a chance, I highly recommend watching his answer about that in the post-game press conference. Or I did
hear him, and I loved his answer.
And I am not a religious person by any means, but his perspective on the situation was very interesting. And he talked about how, he said he immediately thought about his faith and how God has the power to make a strong man weak and a weak man strong. And he's like, in that moment, I was it was humbling. Yeah. I think I'm a pretty good player. I catch that 100 times out of 100 and all this other stuff. And he was, very matter of fact about it. It wasn't, he wasn't, I find Amari Cooper to be a very interesting guy in general, the way he talks about things. He's sort of shy, but he's also he's very smart. He's very interesting. I also found it interesting. He was talking about his religious faith with wearing what looked like a platinum hubcap around his neck, but separate those two things. But it was great to have him be able to come back and get the opportunity. It's also why I think people put way too much emphasis on drops because obviously it matters because it's 4th and 9 and you just turn the ball over. But overall, like David Njoku dropped a ball early in the game, is pretty run of the mill. It doesn't matter so long as overall it works out. And in this case,
there's your character arcs right there.
Yes. And I would even throw Myles Garrett in there too. He had overtime, the Bucs get the ball. It's 3rd and 4. He jumps off sides.
Yes. Yep.
And then he comes back and gets the sack. Later, they actually get a stop otherwise from that. So you had all these guys who they weren't perfect. They made mistakes, but they found a way to sort of persevere. So
and Pete, not just based on what I said last week, I would rather have those moments with the guys like that. I'm fine. Amari Cooper, I was fine. I mean, I wasn't fine with this drop in the moment, but thinking back about it right now, Jacoby was making a play on 4th and 9 to his number one receiver. He dropped it. It didn't work out. I would rather have that happen 100 times over versus throwing it to Harrison Bryant on 4th and 9. Same thing with David Njoku. I mean, just in that these were situational plays that happened, but they were targeting their best players, and their best players were the ones that made mistakes, but also then stepped up later in really big moments.
Yeah, if Harrison Bryant dropped that, I don't think he would have allowed him to make it home. But he had a really unbelievable catch in that game.
He did. He got flipped over on his head, and I was very concerned that he was going to be in concussion protocol. But apparently, he was
the
fine.
way that it was.
I didn't like the way that looked. I was very
Antoine
concerned.
Winfield and he did what guys are taught to do. He goes low, and he Harrison Bryant catches the ball, and it is bang bang. He
held on to it. I was fine. Good job,
literally
Harrison.
Landed on his head and everything, and he caught it. It was it was insane. But yes, had Harrison Bryant been the guy who was targeted on 4th and 9 and dropped it,
we would have done an entire hour just on that, Pete.
I think his tires may have been slashed.
No, never. I like him. He is fine. He does a great job. He's a really good blocker. He does make some plays, but I don't want to see him make the plays in the moment.
Fair enough. We did get one question this week, which I was sort of interested. Somebody I was asking about the challenge that the Browns made on a spot. David Njoku catches a pass and he sort of ends up at the left sideline. It looked like a bad spot.
Yeah.
Live. I didn't think he was necessarily going to get the first down. I thought it was just going to be close to the sticks. Then they opt to challenge it. My position on spot challenges is they are a horrible idea unless there's something very clear with lines you can see that sort of make a compelling case for you. Because if you just challenge it, it is so easy based on just how the rule reads. You need, overwhelming evidence or like whatever to say that we're going to flip it over or to overturn it. It becomes very easy to go, this isn't compelling enough. We're just going to have it stand. And that's exactly what happened. Like, and they get the first down anyway. But it's just like, those are the situations, and they could have used that timeout later on. Those are the type of situations where I think you are putting yourself at a disadvantage trying to get a difference in spot on a spot. The technology should exist to eliminate this as a problem and having guys operate with chains and all this other crap. But nevertheless, I just think I think you're at 10% chance it's going to change. And even if they technically won, it would have been for like a couple inches. It just, to me, the juice is not worth the squeeze in that situation.
I have nothing else to add. I was okay with it. I really don't care. I thought David Njoku clearly had the first down, so I thought that they were going to win it. But things don't typically go in our favor. We didn't even talk about it, Pete. I did have to laugh at the fact that the entire game was played with like the tire marks from the golf cart. Just like, I just like turned on the game and I like completely forgot that happened like earlier in the week. And I'm like, it just was like written out of, I don't know. You couldn't have written a better script again of like just these like circular tire marks on the field of this professional football team. Just added a lot to just the whole thing. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, the broadcast team made a big deal about how the Bucs were very impressed at the Browns grounds crew for fixing it as much as they did. That you could see it, but it was largely superficial. But it was just so strange. Like, for any number of reasons, like the idea that they don't know who did it. I have to think there's cameras somewhere, somehow.
It's an inside job. It was an inside job. Yeah, it has to be. It was a player.
It's just very. That would be more interesting if it was.
Well, Perrion Winfrey was out with he was in concussion protocol. Scooter. Are we sure it wasn't a golf cart?
Yeah, that that was a bizarre revelation that he was in concussion.
Was it an electric scooter? Was it a scooter you ride on at the grocery store? Like, what scooter?
I have to assume it was a little electric thing.
Yeah, those things go fast. My nephew has one. They're like scary.
Yeah, and I don't know if those things are really designed for 300-pound people, but nevertheless, it's like the guy who cannot get out of his own way, and whatever he said. Oh, I've got a new perspective. Okay, I'll check in with you later and see if we're there, because I've heard this from guys before. But 4th down and 10, the Browns had. Try to they go right down the field to get there. Again, they get the 28-yard run from Chubb. They'd run it 3 times in a row. On 1st down, they run it with him. He gets stuffed. 2nd down, I don't remember what they did, but they tried to go to Kareem Hunt on a short little pass over the middle. He was covered, incomplete. 3rd down, they tried to set up a tight end screen, and Devin White made a great play. Yeah. To snuff that out, and he beat Jack Conklin to the spot, was able to bend around, not unlike how Myles Garrett sacked Tom Brady, and just get enough to trip him up, which set up the 4th and 10. So they call the 4th and 10. I don't know what I was expecting in that moment. Obviously, they were going to throw it, but so often they've gone to Amari Cooper.
Yeah,
in that situation, he's been their biggest target. He's got 7 touchdowns on the season. Both he and DPJ ended up being double teamed. There was a lot of space in the middle of the field. Devin White locked on him on David Njoku 1-on-1. He snaps the ball. It looked like Devin White immediately tried like hell to just latch on for dear life and grab as much as he could. And then Jacoby Brissett throws that super high pass, but you've got like, I don't remember what the numbers were on David Njoku's leaping stuff coming out of high school, but he was like, obviously he's a high school, and I think an All-American or some whatever level of competition, high jumper. He goes up with his left hand and he doesn't catch it initially. He corrals it.
Yeah.
And then squeezes it.
Crazy.
And then when he lands on his back, he squeezes that thing like an infant. Yeah. Protecting the hell out of that thing. And it was just great.
Not too hard, but not too soft.
Yes.
That was terrifying to watch in real time because I told you before we started recording, I was working this entire second half, like obviously like on my laptop watching the game in the background, which makes the game less anxiety inducing for me because I'm partially distracted. So I'm like watching the TV and I'm looking at my computer and watching TV. So I'm like feverishly like, I didn't even realize at the time I had like a dead grip on my mouse and I was working in Excel and I have no idea what happened in the spreadsheet I was in, but I had to like go back and like redo a million things because I was obviously watching the TV and watching this play happen in real time. But I saw the throw happen and it was pretty high and I was like, oh no. And when I saw David Njoku in the area and go up, I thought he was going to either get pushed out of bounds or he wasn't going to get both feet in. But he obviously cleared. He was in a good spot where I don't know if it was like the angle of the TV, but I could not tell where he was in the end zone. And then I was like, oh no, please just tell me, number one, he secures the catch on the way down. And number two, he got both feet in and nothing weird happened in that regard. So, just incredible to watch live overall. And quite frankly, obviously being a 4th and 10 play as well, where the game's on the line and your season is quite frankly on the line if it isn't already or wasn't already prior to this play being made. But I was just so happy for him because David has had ups and downs his entire career, and obviously he got the big contract this past off season, and just to see him kind of step into that specific role on the team and be that guy, I'm just really happy for him. I'm happy for him on a number of fronts, and the first one is the thing you've mentioned. He's had up and downs, and a lot of those have been injuries. Like he started out well in seasons. And like the year he broke the scaphoid in his wrist, that derailed him entirely. But this year he was having a breakout year, one of the best tight ends in football. He suffers the high ankle sprain. He's still coming back from the high ankle sprain, still lingering, but whatever, he's playing. And he goes out, makes that impact play. Like, and it reminded me because like the day before. And I know Zach Jackson is very tongue-in-cheek with everything he says. He's not trying to be hurtful or anything. He's just having fun. Stover, Ohio State's tight end, had a chance to squeeze that ball in the end zone. He doesn't really get a good grip on it. Gets punched out. And Zach Jackson tweeted something along the lines of, the Browns will give tight ends 2 extensions for that. Yes, like that was, you're sort of like, all right. And the criticism can be made that David Njoku, even though he's having a great season and has had great moments, he's second in franchise history in tight end touchdowns. That's bananas to me but he hasn't had sort of that moment where like he's had some shares of great plays. He's done all kinds of things. Hurdled people.
He has touchdown receptions, but he's never had that moment, and this was his moment. It was and I loved his attitude coming out of it, that it was sort of, I won't say ordinary, but he treated it like, this is my job, this is what I'm supposed to do, and he was really excited and all that. The other part that I liked about this is David Njoku has been sort of the biggest proponent with Kevin Stefanski going for it on 4th down. He's a guy who has said at times, I love the aggression. I love that is who we are. I want that to be our mindset. I love that he trusts us to go and make plays. And you get into this situation, 4th and 10. And obviously, look, the Browns have gone for 4th down 26 times this year, or 26 or 27. Only the Cardinals have gone for it more. And the Browns percentage is relatively modest. It's like 55.6%. And if you were to take out all the Jacoby Brissett sneaks, it probably gets a whole lot shittier.
Yeah.
But so much of it is creating a mindset where it's not unusual. And obviously the stakes are high because it's, you make this player or you lose. But I can't help feeling like all of that helped them in this situation of just sort of making it less rare. Like the pressure wasn't too much, that this is just sort of who they are. And that helped him just be the dude in that moment. And the last thing I liked about this was after the game, and it was weird how long this took to come out, where Jeff Darlington had a thing where he's like asking Njoku about, I don't know if he said something along the lines of hanging on by a thread or whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he's like, we're not done. We're not done. And like,
he was pretty passionate in that interview.
Yes.
If you watched him.
Well, and then not only that, but we heard the same thing from Myles Garrett last week, where he's talking about, we need to make the most of the potential of the guys we have right now, and talked about how we need to keep fighting in the playoffs. Like, it is clear that this team, even though fans and media are talking about this as the season being over, the players are not interested in that. Mm-hmm. And for all the stuff about, well, they're not playing for each other. They aren't, they don't like the coaching staff, this, that, and the other thing. Like that game, that moment, all of these things you watched in this game, and you could say, well, it's one game, whatever. But there was a lot of passion in that game for players playing for each other, for guys coming out and making plays like that. And the passion they have for the coaching staff and all this other stuff was just like, there's this part of me that just hopes, and it won't happen, that everybody just shuts up about it for a minute and just says, look, it's not because they're not trying. It's because they just aren't always good enough. And on this moment, they were good enough. And you got to see just how important it was for them. And look, they have to carry this over. If they lose to Houston, which would be a gigantic embarrassment, it's almost meaningless. But for them, it's very important. And I like that David Njoku got to enjoy this and deliver that moment and send them to overtime, because it wasn't the game-winning play. It was just the game-tying play. All he did was give them another opportunity to go back out and win. But those are all the things that was so good for him. And it makes the Browns more dangerous. The fact that you can double Amari Cooper, that you can put extra attention on Donovan Peoples-Jones, that you have to account for all of these threats. And there's always still a guy on this offense who can beat you.
Yeah.
By the way, lost in all of this, 136 total yards for Nick Chubb.
I know.
But that's like, one, that's who he is.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. But the fact that he's the humble warrior and what we sort of expect from him. But it's just that there have been that many noteworthy performances of guys delivering, and Nick Chubb, I think fittingly in a lot of ways, got to score the game-winning touchdown, because he did have, maybe it's 128, whatever, over 120 total yards between rushing and receiving, and he gets to cap it off in overtime with a victory. And I really liked, and look, they had plenty of reason not to want to kick the field goal, but I did like the fact that they said, no, we're getting in the end zone. I think that is an identity move as much as it is anything else. This is who we are. We're the team who punches it in. We're not the team that's going to sort of quote unquote lawyer ball it and kick the field goal.
And we're going to put the ball in the hands of one of our star players who we trust fully.
Yes. And as somebody who coaches this stuff, I loved Nick Chubb nudging James Hudson at fullback up a little bit, because I can totally relate to that. Just moving him up a little bit. They didn't get the score on that one. And I love that James Hudson has become the like short yardage jumbo fullback too. That part is just fun. But and even on the play they scored, he gets a hard charge, seems to get knocked sideways, has to sort of regather himself and then fight for that.
Yeah, just keeps churning.
Gets in the end zone. It just sort of, again, it epitomized what this whole game was about. So it was an awesome victory. And had they tied, you could applaud the effort and go, okay, they played hard and ultimately couldn't win. Had they lost, we would have applauded the effort, but that would have been a devastating loss for this group of players to have that much invested, to have put that clearly that much in terms of blood, sweat, and tears and all of that, to then lose. Obviously, for all the reasons that involve Brissett, but just again, it was not a pretty football game. It was an ugly football game with a couple very beautiful plays. I can't imagine how discouraging, dispiriting, just draining it would have been had they gone through all that and lost. I don't know how you feel about that, but yeah, that would have been tough.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we've had a lot of tough pills to swallow this year when it comes to the losses, but yeah, based on how they fought and how they fought to come back and some of the mistakes that were made, if they wouldn't have been able to pull this one out, I think this would have been pretty deflating. And we've had a lot of deflating losses, but this one just would have felt different.
I think the question is, at this point, look, like we said, they're 4-7.
You want to know my fear, Pete?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts leading into the game on Sunday. My fear is that Deshaun Watson obviously coming back and all of the adversity that he is facing, and I say adversity maybe with quotations around it a bit, because a lot of this he obviously brought on himself, whether you believe he did it or did not do it. He put himself in the situation regardless. Okay. Yes. So that's something he's going to have to deal with the rest of his life, the rest of his playing career, etc. My fear is that he is, as most athletes do in these situations, going to use this as motivation to like prove everyone wrong, right? Or prove that, he's this superstar quarterback, whatever. And is going to go out there and just be a gunslinger to try to kind of come back in a light of positivity or, making his quarterback play outshine all of these allegations to try to make the story be about, his comeback, right? Like, because I would say in his mind, he is treating this as everyone's against me, no one likes me, I'm going to go out and prove that I'm a really good quarterback and no one can talk about all this other stuff. So that's like kind of my fear right now. And he obviously hasn't played a snap of football for quite some time. So I do think there will be some rust with that. But I just hope he isn't trying to like overcompensate on the football field if things are not clicking right away.
I think that's justifiable. I think it would be understandable if he came out too pumped up.
Yeah.
And had too much adrenaline going and ultimately sort of punches himself out a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of mixed emotions that will be coursing through him for a lot of different reasons. And like the other thing that I would say is like, listen, this game is going to be talked about. There are people that are going to be tuning into this football game, attending this football game in person to strictly root against him. So like, I think we all just need to keep that in mind overall. Like even fans that walked away from this football team, they're going to watch this game. They want to see him fail, right? Like that's how I'm like, I think we all need to be honest with ourselves. Like there's going to be a very loud crowd rooting against the Cleveland Browns, specifically for the fact that Deshaun Watson is coming back on Sunday.
Yeah, the crowd element's interesting. Judging by what I've seen from Houston Texans attendance, that may not be as big of a factor as we might have thought going into.
Or they'll all show up for this game, particularly.
That is what I'm wondering about.
Yeah.
I there's been some suggestion that ultimately, like, Texans fans aren't going to show up, and the ones that do are actually going to be Browns fans that sort of cheer him and sort of mitigate some of that. I'm less than convinced that's what's going to happen. I think more along the lines that you do. I think there's some element of people who sort of want to get their feelings out there. I don't know if I'd call it a pride thing, like almost like a sports city defending their honor type of thing. But I could see where that becomes a factor. It wouldn't surprise me if the Houston Texans, I have no idea what their ticket sales situation is, but if they find a way to I don't know about giveaway, but make it very affordable for people to come to present themselves in a way that sort of like tries to give them dignity. But the good news for the Browns is the Texans have been so bad that unlike the Browns fans where they show up and are pissed,
Texans fans just don't show up.
Yeah, they just don't show up. So that's an interesting dynamic. I do think that the Browns are going to find ways to sort of avoid putting so much on Watson first. It's not to suggest that he's not going to be a major part of the game plan. He is. I think some of the stuff they're going to do play calling wise that we haven't seen with Brissett is going to make things easier or help him get in a rhythm earlier, get him to succeed earlier. And I think some of that is going to be read type stuff. I think something Jacoby Brissett didn't do, but there are plays the Browns have run that absolutely look to have a read component involved that, that depending on what the defense does, Watson's going to pull the ball out and run. The other thing I think you may see more of is something that Jacoby Brissett I don't think has done all year, which is a staple when Baker was the quarterback, was that stretch play action where you go really hard to the one side and run all the way back. I think that's an easy way to, again, get Watson on the move. Obviously he can beat the defense throwing the ball. They have enough weapons, but if they don't have a guy on him, he's just going to keep it and run. I think you're going to see, I think people will sort of go, oh, that the Browns are just copying what the Philadelphia Eagles were doing. And I guess you can say that, but these are things that Houston was doing with Watson when he was there, and the Browns were selling Watson on this when he was going to come here, that they were going to do some of these concepts to like put him in position to succeed. I think you're going to see a little bit more, and the big question is going to be how much do they want to incorporate that early versus do they have other things they want to do to try to get him comfortable? I do think those are easy ways to sort of create favorable matchups and create easy reads for him throwing the ball that can help him. But it's so hard to guess his mindset. I'm of the impression that he's going to come up super pumped up, maybe over pumped up, and potentially exhaust himself early. Just how that can go, as opposed to coming in super nervous, worried about what the fans are going to do. I think he's going to deliberately try to, like I said, over emote himself into being such a ramped up version of himself that it's going to help him get through that, but could be detrimental theoretically to what they want to do offensively. But between him and the overall sort of feeling of the team, it does whether people seem to like Deshaun Watson, whether or not, or I should say players seem to like Deshaun Watson, whether people sort of like that or not, there is a palpable level of excitement for them to get him back, even though they appreciate what Brissett has done. And obviously, like he has said, he's not dead. He will still be there and still be sort of cheering them on and being a big part of things, which I think is important in making the transition. So I'm very curious to see how this goes. But if the Browns can, even if Deshaun Watson doesn't do anything spectacular, but they just go down to Houston, they get a win. And they're suddenly 5-7. And then they've got back-to-back games against the Bengals and the Ravens, two teams that they, obviously one they beat and the other they played pretty well. It'll be interesting to see if they can sort of make a run. If suddenly this team is like 6-7 hosting Baltimore, like things get nuts pretty quick. And again,
that's Christmas Eve too, right?
Yes, I don't think, like I said, I picked this team to go 8-9 after the 4-7 stretch. But I'm at this point, it's hard to know what's going to happen, and I do think I'm not sure the team knows what's going to get. I could see a situation where the Browns absolutely clobber the Texans, who feel sorry for themselves already. They're if you listen to some of the stuff their players are saying about that team, it's like, it's depressing. Like it's going to be interesting to see how this team responds, how this team transitions, how they proceed with this now getting Watson back. This is sort of an unprecedented move in a lot of ways to have a player like this start his first game, his 12th game of the season. It was the biggest trade in franchise history and everything that's attached. And the fact that like Tony Busby has a box and he's going to take some number of accusers to it. I think 10 is the number that's being reported, and the element that has around this. I don't know how I feel about that part either. But it's just one of those things where I can't wait to see what happens, even though it's bittersweet to see Brissett leave.
Yeah, I would agree. Jacoby has been quite the bright spot through this whole season. And I will say, like, when we signed him, I was kind of like, whatever. Guess we'll just get by. It'll be pretty boring, whatever. But I have to say, like, I've really, really grown to like him, not only as a player, but just as a human being and listening to him in press conferences. Like, he has a personality. He's funny. He's respectful. He seems to be well loved. He obviously works really hard. He seems very humble. Honestly, I don't think we could have asked for a better quarterback to be put in this situation than what we got. So like the Browns, they definitely knew what they were doing with this move. That's for sure.
Yes, he's been a great ambassador for the team. And look, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, I think everybody in that building would love to have Brissett back as the backup next year. But if he signs either as a starter or to compete for the starter, everybody in that building is going to be absolutely thrilled for him and everything he's accomplished and earning himself that opportunity, including the Browns front office, because they would potentially get a compensatory pick for it. But that would be, if you were going to make a movie about Jacoby Brissett sort of season, that would sort of be the end where he signs the contract to be the starter. Regardless of what happens, that would sort of be the end of it. He gets his opportunity. So I'm excited to see that for him. I am dubious, but I'm hopeful for him because I think he deserves it as a person as much as anything else. Hell, he might end up in Houston next year. So it's going to be interesting. But look, I love this game so much. For all the reasons we've discussed, I think this team needed it. I think we needed it. And I'm hopeful that this can jumpstart something. And I don't have delusions of suddenly the Browns making the postseason or anything like that. But I'm willing to let them – I'm more than happy to let them just go out and do it and see where we end up. Because I think, to me, I've been – my emotions on this season have been sort of – my expectations are low. So it's been sort of easy for me to not be like – crushed and devastated with some of these losses because I looked at what this team had. And it was sort of like, all right, well, they're not a very good team. So why should I get super upset about it? But having said that, I'm curious to see if they can make something out of this, if they can sort of make this a great story for them and build this into what really matters. Obviously, everything that they've done is important this season for Jacoby Brissett and everything else. But like 2022, if they can suddenly win a couple games and they get things like Martin Emerson emerging, Anthony Schwartz contributing, Donovan Peoples-Jones continuing to establish himself as a big part of the offense, David Njoku taking that big step, Amari Cooper proving to be the number one receiver they've needed all this year, for a decade, it will not have been a wasted year. It will have been an important building block that hopefully allows them to be the team that we have all sort of been waiting for them to be for years and years and years next year and then the following. So I'm curious to see where they go, and I'm excited to see what that happens. And I'm hoping it can continue to be sort of more optimistic and less, let's blow this whole thing up and fire everybody.
Yeah. Listen, I think if nothing else, this win gave us hope. And I'm just looking forward to seeing the team build upon this win and seeing what the future could potentially look like. No expectations other than that. Yeah.
I mean, look, there are a lot of great sports out there. It is just so hard to contend with the feeling winning in football, just the nature of the beast. You play once a week, it sort of sets the tone for everything else. Even if you're not a fan of the Browns, chances are you're impacted by what they do on a given Sunday. So it's always interesting to see that. So it's always better when they win. Having said that, the Browns have to beat the Houston Texans. We better be talking about a 5-7 football team next week, and we'll get into everything with Deshaun Watson and everything else. But hopefully, they do what they're supposed to do, get it done, and we can move on to bigger and better things. But as always, subscribe, tell a friend. Leave ratings, all that good stuff. Help us out. We love doing it. So if you're one of the people who's listening, by all means, spread the word. Beyond that, we will be back next week, and we will see where this team takes us.